I think the last couple decades, I remember I was in high school, junior high, when Rodney King happened and witnessing this Black man just being pummeled by these white police officers. It was the most violent, horrific thing I had seen. And who knew that decades later, this would be a normal occurrence. It would be something that we would see regularly. And so even for people who have not lost someone personally, we all went through collective trauma.
100%.
Watching or seeing the images of Trayvon Martin, of Sandra Bland, of Mike Brown, and of course, George Floyd and all the other, Rashard Brooks, like all the other, Breonna Taylor, all the other nameless people who never became a hashtag because there was no body cam footage. But we just knew these things happened. It was our birthright to go through this. Social media has a different impact on how we grieve, how we process grief. And that was something for me, weeping over strangers. And because I remember hearing my grandmother's guttural cry. I remember my mother like just laid out on the floor, like just overcome by grief. And every day I thought about these people who were dying, their families, what they were going through, and how were they living through this. And in that, we were traumatized by it. How did that impact you guys? How did you navigate seeing these things? And how do you carry it with you today?
My first trauma that I witnessed on social media was Trayvon Martin. I was probably a freshman, sophomore in college. I marched. And my mom used to be like, "Okay, Angela Davis." Like I was like determined we were gonna make a change, and this was never gonna happen again. And then, like you said, the list of names just kept growing, and especially I feel like during the pandemic, it seemed like it was back to back to back.
That was trauma.
Yeah.
The pandemic. So the world shut down and we were confined to our homes. And then we saw death after death, violence after violence, protests. The protests got violent, ugly rhetoric. Wasn't the first time we had a racist in the White House, but certainly during that time, it was a pinnacle point in society. It was overwhelming.
I think that it happens on purpose, honestly. That's how I have taken it, because I look at how vigilant and how determined I was to make a difference in our community, and how it numbed me out, where it's like no matter whose hashtag it is or whether it's Palestine or there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
That's what it kind of made me feel. And I think that our generation has, because it's so common, it's like, oh, you just scroll and there might be a little sensory thing on there, like, oh, this is sensitive content, but you might see someone get shot. Like, there's nothing I can do. It made me feel helpless. Like, there's nothing I can do about it, so why care? Why get so invested? And I didn't used to be like that.
Yeah.
It took my fight, I feel like.
That's interesting. I felt less kind. I felt less willing. It's hard to know who is an enemy and who is an ally.
Yeah.
And that was a period of time where I just decided I don't have the energy or effort to figure out who's an enemy or who's an ally. So let me just rock with the people who I know.
Who rock with me.
Right. Like, I don't know. This is our first time meeting. I don't know either of you ladies before today. But I knew you before today. And when you walked in the room, I knew you. We know each other. And it's an easier, more relaxed state of being. Watching my brothers and sisters get murdered repeatedly, and watching Black Lives Matter become a controversial thing to say.
Yeah.
Saying my own life matters was controversial. And watching the way people align themselves, witnessing other people's silence who were not being traumatized, it just made me really shrink. Not shrink, I don't want to say that. It made me retreat into safer spaces.
So it made me numb, of course, seeing it over and over again. And I think so many in our society, and especially in the Black community, it's like rehashing these images, right? It's like re-traumatizing your brain over and over and over again. And that's what it happened. That's what had happened in the social media cycle. And I also feel like, we all experienced this collective anxiety within the pandemic. And it just made all of us afraid. And I've heard of this notion of vicarious trauma. It's like where you experience trauma, but you weren't necessarely there, right? It's like vicariously living through somebody else's trauma.
Yeah.
And so I think we internalize that stuff. And I'm an empath. I'm a Pisces. I'm sensitive by nature. And so I felt like I was taking on everybody else's trauma and pain through that. And being a mental health advocate in the work that I did, you know, we hosted a lot of virtual community conversations within the Black community, allowing people to talk about it. Because we really, truly had to process what we were talking about.
Yeah.
A lot of major corporations, you know, brought me in to do talks for their staff, especially when, you know, we saw what happened with George Floyd. And I mean, it was just such a day of shock and a week of shock for everybody. And it was like the day that everything stood still for us.